BBC News at 6 o'clock. This is Alan Smith. Good evening. At 21 minutes to 2 this afternoon, Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission, addressed a news conference in Brussels.
We have a deal.
Standing next to Mr Juncker was Boris Johnson. He said that deal was good for the UK and for Europe.
It means that the UK leaves whole and entire on October the 31st. Now is the moment for us to get Brexit done.
The withdrawal agreement came after a night of intense negotiations and in the nick of time as EU leaders gathered for a summit to discuss Brexit. There's to be a special sitting of the Commons on Saturday for MPs to vote on the deal. Labour, the SNP and the Liberal Democrats have rejected it. And crucially, the DUP, which has been supporting the Conservative minority government, says it cannot vote for it. In other news, there's been another year-on-year rise in knife crime recorded by police in England and Wales. Extinction Rebellion activists have questioned their new tactic of disrupting public transport services in London after angry confrontations with commuters. And the former England football star Paul Gascoigne has been cleared of sexually assaulting a woman he kissed on a train. 3 months after coming to power, Boris Johnson has struck a new Brexit deal with the European Union, but he faces a struggle to get it through Parliament. The agreement, the product of days of wrangling in Brussels, involves fundamental changes to arrangements in Northern Ireland. Theresa May's backstop, which aimed to prevent the return of physical checks along the Irish border, has been replaced. Instead, there will now, in effect, be a customs border in the Irish Sea. The Prime Minister promised the plan would allow the UK to leave as one united kingdom and strike trade deals around the world. And the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker called it fair, adding there was no argument for further delay. His words have put pressure on MPs to back the deal, but its chances of getting Commons approval have diminished after the Democratic Unionist Party announced it was strongly opposed. Our Europe correspondent Kevin Connolly reports now on a day of drama in Brussels.
EU leaders had all feared they'd be making their way down the red carpet into the summit venue, with the details of a Brexit deal still in dispute. As it turned out, they were spared. Shortly before they began to gather at the European Council building, the EU's chief negotiator Michel Barnier emerged to announce that the deal was done.
Discussions over the past days have at times been difficult, but we have delivered, and we have delivered together.
There were last-minute phone calls between Boris Johnson and Jean-Claude Juncker, ironing out the final problems over which the negotiating teams had haggled long into the night. The two men then appeared side by side, not just to announce the deal, but to commend it to the parliaments who must now approve it in Brussels and in Westminster. Mr Johnson said the deal amounted to a real Brexit.
I do think that this deal represents a very good deal both for the EU and for the UK, and it's a reasonable, fair outcome and reflects the large amount of work that's been undertaken by both sides.
Jean-Claude Juncker, who's coming to the end of his term as President of the European Commission, had a slightly nuanced message to deliver. For him, this is about relief that there's a deal set against the overall sadness of Brexit. Perhaps for that reason, his normally jocular style slipped briefly as he dealt with questions from British reporters.
We don't think that it's possible to give another prorogation. There will be no other prorogation. I'm speaking.
I'm sorry.
Mr Juncker's message was that there'd be no further prolongations, an apparent attempt to help Mr Johnson by warning MPs there'd be no point in withholding support for the deal in the hope of future negotiations. That wouldn't ultimately be his decision, but this was his view.
This deal means that there is no need for any kind of prolongation. This is a fair, a balanced agreement. It is testament to our commitment to finding solutions. It provides certainty where Brexit creates uncertainty.
For all the regret about Brexit, there is palpable relief in Brussels that a deal has been done. Proceedings at Westminster will now be followed anxiously in the other 27 EU capitals.
The negotiations focused on the element of the Theresa May deal, which was blamed for its failure to get the backing of Parliament, the Northern Ireland backstop. Our reality check correspondent Chris Morris examines the measures which have replaced it and what they mean for trade.
Both sides have made concessions to reach this agreement, but perhaps the biggest single concession has come from Boris Johnson, accepting the EU position that there can be no border checks anywhere on the island of Ireland. That means, whatever language is used to describe it, there will be a de facto border for both customs and regulatory checks within the UK, between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That's something that Mr Johnson has said in the past would be unacceptable. Here's what he told the Democratic Unionist Party conference in November 2018.
We would be damaging the fabric of the Union with regulatory checks and even customs controls between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, on top of those extra regulatory checks down the Irish Sea that are already envisaged in the withdrawal agreement. Now, I have to tell you, no British Conservative government could or should sign up to any such arrangement.
But there is a compromise. Even though the de facto border would be down the Irish Sea, with Northern Ireland following EU rules on customs and tariffs under the auspices of the European Court of Justice, the legal border would remain the land border in Ireland. In other words, Northern Ireland would officially leave the EU customs union with the rest of the UK, allowing the whole country to take part in any future trade deals negotiated around the world. That is an important point of principle for the Prime Minister, but it sets up a complex dual customs system with which business will have to come to terms. If a bit of machinery was exported from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, the EU tariff on it would have to be paid. If that widget never left Northern Ireland, whoever paid the tariff could apply for a rebate. But if said widget was subsequently put into a larger piece of machinery that was exported to the Republic of Ireland, then the rebate would not apply. So it's complicated, and it does set Northern Ireland apart. But it's not the same as the original EU offer to Theresa May, which became known as the Northern Ireland-only backstop. That would have remained in place to avoid a hard border under all circumstances. This deal sets out a way that the Northern Ireland Assembly could vote against these proposed new economic arrangements in the future. So there is, in effect, a get-out clause. But it's designed in a way which makes it extremely unlikely that it would ever be triggered. It is as close to a permanent solution as this compromise would allow.
Boris Johnson has appealed to MPs to get the deal over the line when the Commons holds a rare sitting on Saturday, the first time it's done so since